Do you ever hear?
There's a total disconnect now between the ruling group and the masses.
I hate psychology.
Clear out.
They're the same worm-like characters.
Analysts,
Fuck you with your stupid argument.
they should not bother us.
Democracy.
All of this just works.
Vote for the generations who are coming.
Fully dynamic game engine.
A millennial video essayist.
Always support strength
Constant craving.
and identity.
I haven't yearned. They are a disease of our time.
Clear them out. You're voting for what your grandfather and father fought for.
I sit and yearn.
Hello, one and all, and welcome back to another week. Another episode. It's another week, another episode of the Longhouse, the weekly show, the consistent weekly show for the sensible centrist. We're back. We got another serving of content for all of you this week. It's going to be a bit of a hodgepodge of news articles that have caught our interest over the past few weeks and days, especially considering the happenings that's been going on in America. We've been, swept up in all the election stuff, and I promised that last week was the last week we're going to talk about America, at least directly. It's hard to not talk about America indirectly for a little bit. So, Letting Path, how are you doing?
Hello, everyone. So we are pivoting back to Europe again. Hopefully we'll do some more coddly content this time. Like I said before the stream, I'm not in the mood for super adversarial content. I need a break. I think I need a little break for this stuff. Might get into some edgier topics, but let's see what's going on across the pond. What's going on in Europe currently? There were some happenings in Amsterdam recently, and involving Israelis and what do you call it? Dutch Muslims? Would that be correct?
I guess that's what
you can find the article.
I am bringing the article up right now. Here we go. So this is a Norwegian report of a happening in Amsterdam. It says that Amsterdam turned into a battlefield. Israeli supporters are going to France. Are next going to France. In Amsterdam, dozens were arrested. This week, 2,000 police officers will take action as France welcomes the Israeli national team. Maccabi Tel Aviv Football Club is coming to Norway next. So that's the sort of Norwegian angle.
But this, this case has been reported on. You get on Twitter, you have the right-wing Twitter. It's either the philo-Semitic faction, or you have the anti-Semitic faction, and they both reported on this. And the philo-Semite said it was a pogrom, and the anti-Semite said this was a Mossad operation. Right. So we hope that the Norwegian slightly anti-Semitic liberal media can give a fair both sides coverage of this story. But we'll see.
Yes, we are one of the most anti-Semitic nations in the world, according to Jewish leaders.
Well, and this football hooligan group, apparently they're going on tour, right, to all of the hostile nations. I think we mentioned this previously. If you look at the European continent, the most anti-Israel countries, the four most anti-Israel countries in order would be Spain, Ireland, Netherlands, and Norway.
Yeah.
Just based on boycotts and general political attitudes.
4 minutes into the stream, but it's typical behavior of some people to act like that, isn't it? To sort of intentionally go places where you're not welcome in order to sort of stoke tensions.
Yeah, we've seen it before.
It's encroachment is the playbook of a certain group, isn't it? So, separating football and politics has become a utopia. Everyone who does not work in the International Football Association, everyone who works in the International Football Association, or sorry, who doesn't work in the International Football Association knows that. And this week it's been getting worse. On Thursday, Maccabi Tel Aviv met Ajax in the Europa League. Why? Hang on. Why is Israel playing in the Europa League? Is this like a Eurovision thing? It happens at the same time. It happens at the same time that tens of thousands have been killed in Israel's war on the Gaza Strip. On the pitch, the game ended 5-0. In the streets of Amsterdam, Israeli supporters were beaten up and chased. 63 people were arrested by
Do you know
police.
who won? Like
The street fight?
No, the football match.
Considering they said it was Tel Aviv versus Ajax, I'm thinking it's Israel.
Well, what's Ajax? Is that
Ajax is a football club.
from?
It's AFC Ajax or something like that. For
The
I think it's
Dutch?
the city of Amsterdam.
Oh well.
It's like, you know.
Well, they got
Nice.
smacked. That's really bad, isn't it? If you're getting 5-0 in soccer, that's awful.
Especially the Netherlands or the Dutch who actually are pretty good.
There's no reason Dutch people should be beaten this badly by Jews. Actually,
in football, no.
Yeah, no, in soccer. Like, let me just check this out. So it's Tel Aviv versus Ajax. I'm going to see the score here. So it's 5. It's Ajax wins 5. Tel Aviv 0. So supreme Dutch victory.
So this is on. Maybe hang on. It might be the translation, because usually if you say that, Tel Aviv meets Ajax and you then say 5-0 or 5-0, you're. But of course, it was a home match for Ajax, so that means Ajax is. They usually say the home team first. So
yeah, no, I mean, I think the whole home field advantage, and you have like Dutch Chads. They're like 6'4" average height or something.
Yeah.
I don't see how the Jews win that, but
yeah, no. So like Maximus Aquila said, how did 5-0 Israelis beat the Dutch? Apparently they didn't. That's on us. 63 people were arrested by the police, and there was no lack of condemnations. Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof, which, I'm sorry, but Dutch sometimes isn't a real language. Mr. Dick Schneef and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called the actions anti-Semitic. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called the attacks abhorrent. And here's a quote by Ursula von der Leyen saying, outraged by last night's vile attacks targeting Israeli citizens in Amsterdam. I just spoke with Prime Minister Schoof. I strongly condemn these unacceptable acts. Anti-Semitism has absolutely no place in Europe, and we are determined to fight all forms of hatred. In retrospect, videos have appeared showing that the Israeli football supporters did not perform very well either. They're saying did not act very upstandingly either. Here's a Palestinian flag being torn down from buildings in Amsterdam. Let's see, okay, it's just sort of auto playing here, so you can see some guys pulling down a Palestinian flag. On their way to the game, supporters shouted, "Let IDF win, F the Arabs." British Sky News is among those who have translated the cries from the metro in Amsterdam. So here they're shouting, I guess. Before the game, Maccabi supporters also made a sound.
Can you get the sound there? I think there was.
I can try to get
like
the
sound.
I mean, at this point, it's just football noises, right? Before the game, Maccabi supporters also made a sound while the rest of the arena held a minute's silence for the at least 270 flood victims in Valencia. Why? I mean, I would get it if if they did some sort of like Gaza thing, right? But this is just like an unrelated tragedy, right?
Well, the context is that Spain has boycotted weapons imports.
Oh, okay. She's
weapons
talk
to
about
Israel.
being, yeah.
So it's all very politically charged.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent 2 planes to evacuate the supporters. What is it with with like always having the planes ready. Like we've talked about this before.
The
They
the
already have
paranoia
like
is
the
pretty
evacuation
intense,
planes
but
ready.
it sounds so far fetched to do something like this. Like your prime minister have like planes ready for you. Like you go to another
For
country
some
to
random football
cheerlead a team.
hooligan.
So you have like set helicopters ready to pick them up again unless they get in trouble. It's interesting. I mean, it props to them, I guess, for being ready, but
I guess.
it's hard to imagine.
Vitlau says peak in-group preference across the board, right? Boo the Spanish, boo everyone else, get the helicopters ready for when they retaliate, right? Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent 2 planes to evacuate the supporters. They landed in Israel on Friday. At the airport, supporters continue their cries. Quote, why are there no schools in Gaza? Because there are no children left. Jesus Christ. It was shouted according to Al Jazeera and several other actors. I mean, at this point, it almost feels like, the football supporters are, political operators, right?
I think the
Like
lines are quite
you get
blurred.
them back, you get them sort of back into safe territory, and they just go back into shouting like obscene nonsense to provoke everyone. Next battle arena, France. Next week, the football matches. Next week, another football match is slated. The Israeli national team travels to Paris to meet France in the Nations League. The match will be on Thursday at 8:45. The French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau said before the weekend that someone had called for France versus Israel to be played elsewhere. I do not accept that, he says. It will be the same as giving in to threats of violence and anti-Semitism, he wrote on X. What? I guess the Interior Minister has taken a clear stand after the Paris Saint-Germain met Atletico Madrid in the Champions League on Wednesday. He criticized the PSG supporters' Free Palestine banner. Retailleau believed such a banner was completely unacceptable, according to Reuters. I guess he also believes that, booing during the minute silence for the Valencia victims is unacceptable as well, which leaves us at an impasse, I guess.
Both sides.
Both sides bad. I am very smart. In Paris, around 2,000 police officers will be deployed around the Stade de France on Thursday. This is how security during the match must be ensured. But the mood between France and Israel got a bit of a break before the weekend, which puts the settlement further at the forefront. Israeli police... but the mood between France soured, I think. Israeli police entered a church in Jerusalem on Thursday. They arrested 2 French security officials with diplomatic status. It ended with the French foreign minister cancelling a visit and France condemning the actions, according to a press release from the French Foreign Ministry. So it's getting quite heated, actually. I know we've been talking about this before, and other people mentioned as well, but sort of the old generation, the Israeli guard is really starting to grate on a lot of people, right? In terms of like world politics, they're running out of friends, right?
Well, certainly, I'm a little bit confused with the article. I think I zoned out a little bit, but now we're talking about France, or are we still in the?
No, we're talking about
still in
France,
the Netherlands.
but
Yeah.
Israel and France are not very happy at each other because Israeli police entered a church in Jerusalem on Thursday. They arrested 2 French security officials with diplomatic status. It ended with the French foreign minister cancelling a visit and France condemning these actions, according to a press release. So, I mean, they keep sort of making enemies in the State Departments, and they have been doing ever since, I think, well, for the past year, right? Ever since October 7, really. They've just kind of kept antagonizing everyone.
Yeah, they do seem to be aiming for kind of the core support, right? The hardline pro-Israel people, and then alienating everyone else. And I'm thinking about this in the Dutch situation as well. If how much of this is really giving fuel to someone like Geert Wilders, who is the prime minister currently, or maybe he isn't the prime minister. At least that his party won the election. I'm not exactly sure how they divided up the roles, considering how small his party is. But I mean, there is something to it when he is elected on the promise of like remigration, anti-immigrant sentiment, he's like the most counter-jihad candidate, one of the most counter-jihad figures in Europe, probably, at least at that level in politics. So if this is not, it's embarrassing to have this happen when he is president, and the question is if he's going to do something about this, use this kind of justify further actions against the kind of the Dutch Muslim population. I'm not sure what comes of this.
Yeah, I don't know. It's extremely. It feels. As Henrik in the comments says, it feels kind of mask off, but it's a very bold strategy. Maccabi Tel Aviv will return to the Europa League in January. The destination Aspmyra in Buda, which is in Norway. And so far, Maccabi Tel Aviv has informed supporters that they're not bringing any supporters. It informs the local football club Buda Glimt's general manager. It's being told by the general manager of the local football club. Okay. Nevertheless, the police are preparing for an Israeli team to come to town. When the Israelis G19 national team visited Shein in March, objects were thrown at protesters and against the arena and at the police. There's no doubt that it's challenging to accept teams from Israel in terms of safety, and it's of course perfectly legitimate to demonstrate against the participation of Israeli teams in international football, as long as it happens in a peaceful and orderly form, says the director of competition of the Norwegian Football Association. And that's it, really.
So we'll have to keep people posted when they show up. So when is this going to be in?
Bring this strike team to Norway.
When they show up in Norway, we'll be on the ground reporting. We'll be participating in the Norwegian pogroms.
Vingel says, I enjoy how Walrus is so internationally always pronounces Norwegian words with an English pronunciation. Well, I'm trying to make it easier for our international audience. I could go sort of full-on dialect, but
I don't know which one is more...
it sort of trips me up.
I don't know which one is more international, to kind of use the authentic language pronunciation of words, or to keep everything in the American English one. I'm actually not decided on that.
Well, you can let me know in the comments. What do you like? Would you want me to be, extremely sort of Norwegian in my pronunciations, or should I keep this sort of international pronunciation for the benefit of you, the listener? All right, so that was a bit of a light start. I do have on YouTube a Q&A thing running. So if you are listening on YouTube, you can post questions there and I'll round them up as we go. I'm unfortunately, because StreamYards, I don't think supports me sort of pulling these up yet. I'm just going to have to read them out. So first off, Vingel asks, did you see Blackpilled's most recent stream about Trump from 4 days ago? No, I can't say I did. Do you recall?
I don't watch. I only watch him kind of by secondhand if I get clips or something. But I follow him on Twitter. He's certainly worth paying attention to. He's been one of the people, I think, who's been sort of a bit more honest in regards to the Trump stuff. And as his name goes, like black-pilled, right? It is depressitainment in a sense, but there is at least a certain level of honesty. He's not been trying to just brainlessly shill for Trump. I get it for the people who did that, right? I said that I didn't want to do the adversarial monologue here, but... I was talking about like, the people who have been doing the campaigning for Trump, right? And I was looking at their behavior on Twitter, and the behavior of like these big dissident right content creators, and I had two theories as to what was going on here. Either this is very shrewd calculated friend-enemy distinction stuff. That they're actually practicing Schmithian friend-enemy politics on an intellectual level, and you're just going all out, Saul Alinsky style on the Trump campaign to make sure he gets over the finish line. And when you get over the finish line, we can focus internally and go back to the intellectual discussion. That's theory number one. Theory number two is that they're actually being herded by MAGA. Essentially, they've been subsumed into the MAGA machine, and they've had about 20 to 30 IQ points docked, and they're going to have that permanently. And basically, what they're going to be doing after Trump wins is to gaslight Trump's supporters into whatever they want to believe about Trump, or whatever Trump is doing. They're just going to apologize for it, or gaslight people into thinking that he's actually doing what they promised that he would do, which he isn't. We talked about that term post-truth, right, on the former stream, and this is the term. It's been used for many characters, like say the way the Putin regime works, for example. It's actually very similar in terms of the logic behind it. Whereas there's so many things that are being said, but nothing that's being committed to on an intellectual level, to the point that everybody can just take a little tidbit here and there and construct sort of a version of Putin in a sense that they believe in, and then they'll walk around and thinking that he is a Russian nationalist, or that he's a liberal, or that he is like an Orthodox Christian, or he's a communist, or all of these different versions. And he's very much openly playing into that himself. And I think it's the same thing with Trump, that he will walk around from stage to stage and say different things, and depending on what people get fed algorithmically, content-wise, they have some picture of Trump as to what he's going to do. And that's why you have like these these imams in Michigan, for example, who are endorsing Trump and saying that he's going to bring peace to the Middle East, for example.
Didn't you do a video about like Texan Muslims or something?
Well, yeah, I mean that's something else. That was not a Trump shilling video. That was more of people who were just trying to get white boys on board with the Islam stuff. But there are these weren't white Muslims. These are Arab immigrants that have immigrated into the United States, who live in swing states, who came out and endorsed Trump. At the same time that he's doing these rallies in New York, talking about he's like the most pro-Jewish guy ever. So the Orthodox Jews have like a version of him, and the Muslims have a version, and the Amish have a version of Trump, and the Latinos who are voting for him, who think that he's not going to deport them, he's going to deport every other Latino, and we have the Hindu Trump and every other version of that.
Hindu Trump, yeah.
And the essentially
Japan Trump.
Yeah, that's just
Japan
going to
big on
go.
Trump.
Yeah, this is just going to go on. The people they're just going to keep shilling to those bases and gaslighting them into thinking that the reason that if Trump is not able to do what he promised, it's because he's being infiltrated by the deep state, or it's because the Jews are tripping him up, or like there's some other reason why this isn't working, right? And it's the exact same way that that Russian politics, this sort of Vladislav Surkov circus stuff, is working. Like I've commented on that on Twitter with you have the American Communist Party, that is the Jackson Hinkle group of people, and then you have like the what is it called, World War Now, that is the Ortho branch, and they're both deeply integrated into the sort of Putinist network. But the way that they're doing, they have these fake feuds with each other, where they're talking about how communism is not really Russian, or they're looking at these clips of, say, where Putin is going into Groznygrad, into these mosques, and he's kissing the Quran, with Kadyrov and like all these other Muslim leaders. And he's talking about how this is a body double. This is like a Putin body double who's been possessed by
it's
by demons
thing
or
all
something.
over.
Yeah.
It's
not actually Putin. He's being possessed by evil spirits, or when Putin is liberalizing immigration, it's the Jewish oligarchs that are doing it to him or something. And they just keep feeding. It's so obvious. It's so blatant, but they just keep feeding into whatever algorithmic delusion that that particular voting group believes in, to just make excuses. And honestly, when I look at Twitter now, that's what's going to happen. That's what I predict is going to happen with Trump. That instead of criticism, they'll just continue gaslighting their own fans.
I do think though that letting sort of the spirit of the jinn and the surge of jihad overtake a white man is very cool and Paul Atreides pilled. Um, but yes, I see what you're saying. It becomes very silly, and post-truth really is the word. Everything is true all at once, and it's not my fault.
So the term I guess from that book is nothing is true and everything is possible, and that's it just kind of encapsulates the spirit of post-truth. But this is kind of the, what do you call it, like the meta? That's what the gaming kids call it, like the new meta in politics.
That's the strat, yeah.
Post-truth that's kind of the top tier political strategy to defeat technocratic liberalism. It's just it's the most effective in the age of information. When you have algorithmically controlled feeds in the internet, it's just going out and just saying everything to everybody at the same time.
As we've talked about before, then the question is post-truth stabilizing or accelerationist, right?
It's accelerationist without a doubt. Or well, it's stabilizing from I think in the Russian sphere it's stabilizing in a sense. So actually, I'm not going
because Russia wasn't big on truth
completely backfill, because it's used to in Russia to sort of maintain support for Putin, I guess, sort of across the board, and the policy sort of maintaining macroeconomic stability and support broadly, even though the economy is somewhat stagnant and the wars are putting that under pressure. But you could say it's stabilizing in one sense, that you can gather a very broad base of support from it, but it's not going to lead to like a higher standard of living. It's not going to solve any problem that Trump is talking about solving. Or if you're talking about inflation or what are these typical things like inflation, immigration, or anything like that, you think it's actually not likely to solve any of these problems at the core or really get to any of it. But it ensures at least a broad support among the base when you do politics like this.
All right. I have a couple of other questions as well. Krang San says, is the current level of non-European immigration to European countries sufficient to counter declining birth rates? Probably not, because Hans Rosling is eternally proven correct. Whenever the immigrant enters the West, they stop being fertile statistically. So no is the answer. I think you can back me up on that, Ludwig Bath.
Well, it depends on what you mean by effective. I mean, if you have a constant stream of immigration, then that will counteract it in a sense. Sure. But you have to rely on that tap has to continue, and then okay, new people come in, their birth rates converge, and then new people come in and they converge. So you kind of just stack these on top of each other. The problem is that when you run out of people, I guess. The world is so modern that like everywhere has these declining birth rates, and there's nowhere to take people from. That's when you've sort of run out of people.
It is a band-aid fix, but it's not a counter. Nordanon says, one of my uni lecturers believes in a conspiracy. She believes that the Trump administration and Russia are conspiring to implement a traditionalism in the West because both Bannon and Dugin likes Julius Evola. Thoughts? That sounds a bit far-fetched. I'm sure there's some sort of overlap in philosophy, but I would see that as sort of almost accidental. As I've said before, my sort of big awakening came from understanding that Russia isn't interested in controlling America. They're just interested in destabilizing America.
Well, I think you have to go back to the post-truth lens. Is that the traditionalism is just kind of one of these angles that they're using to gain support for it, like instituting traditionalism. I think. I mean, in what sense? You'd probably be better off like prodding the teacher as to like her actual understandings of Evola, for example. I think
that's better.
They've read,
which is impossible because if you read enough Evola, it loops back in on itself and eats its own tail, essentially. So,
well, I mean, Evola is an elitist, right? And the post-truth is kind of the opposite. It's sort of the most populist kind of Kali Yuga type ideology that I think you could.
which
you can
is
find anywhere.
why sort of I oppose it, right? Ultimately, because
Do you
the
mind if
people
I
who are
share
all
a
on board
screen?
on the the new Twitter, the new X, and everything are like the most slop, and I mean sort of slop as in low quality individuals and posters and political entities that exist, and these are who the post-truth cater to, right? And it might topple this technocracy, but the problem is you won't be able to build anything out of it. So, yeah.
I mean, Bannon's thing is like the sort of post-racial working class coalition, and what does that have to do with Evolian traditionalism? Very little. It is just more of a cudgel to, like Dugin's thinking is like you just create this soup of every anti-liberal thinker that you could imagine. So you put some communists in there, and you put like even Nilin or I don't remember the other guy. There's some other like Russian philosophers that are more kind of communist friendly. You have like the Russian nationalists, the Eurasianists, the communist thinkers, the Orthodox thinkers, just everything that's not Western Enlightenment liberalism, essentially everything that's not free market capitalism with like liberal democratic institutions. Everything that's not that, just put in a soup, where people just believe whatever they want about their rulers. So, but I mean, I saw this graphic posted on X, which I found quite interesting if you want to do some post-election analysis. And sort of the failure of, say, someone like Alan Lichtman to use the 13 keys to analyze it. And my draw from this graph here is that if you want to win an American election, you need a populist candidate. Absolutely need someone who's like a man of the people. They have not had, I think, an elitist president in the United States since maybe FDR or Woodrow Wilson. And if you look at here, like every winning candidate here, you have, say, Bill Clinton wins the election. He wins with low education, low income voters. Obama wins with very low income, low education voters. Biden wins with the sort of like, Biden is a little bit more in the sort of low income, high education, so sort of teachers union type stuff. But what you're seeing at like the more you go towards higher education and higher income voters, you lose. Basically, you want to be attracting low income or low education people as much as possible. So you're seeing this across the board, like Bob Dole lost against Bill Clinton, Mitt Romney lost against Obama. I mean, I never thought about it this way, but he's like one of the most elitist modern candidates for the American presidency, Mitt Romney. And I don't think that's even disputable.
I posthumously, or I guess retrospectively, sort of lament the loss of Mitt Romney. I think the world would be
actually.
If he had won and the and Harambe hadn't been killed, the world would be a much different place. The timeline would have been very different.
That's what I'm going back in the time machine to save Harambe, and so we can have Mitt Romney, or maybe I'll stop the epic rap battle video from coming out or something. So,
what's the thing? You have to just switch the position on the thumbnail because that's an accurate predictor for who wins.
Yeah. I'll try to do that, or stop the Mitt Romney Gangnam Style parodies or something like the. At least my at the time, I had the impression that he lost because of all the internet parody stuff. There's probably more to it, but he was legitimately like the most kind of like intellectual, high income, high education, Mormon family, lots of kids. It's just great. It's just great all around. I don't care if he's boring. I really like Romney, sort of in retrospect. But you're seeing the same thing, I think, with say Kamala Harris as well. She has like a very her voter base is like high income, high education, and this is what you get when you try to aim for the center. For this kind of former conservative people, and also I think the reason why you should never run a woman ever, because if you're running a woman against a man and you're trying to see who is going to be the most populist, like the case is that, okay, you have debates and you have these town halls and the rallies. So if the woman is doing well in the debates, say, like, in my opinion, I think Kamala Harris did well in the debate. You are just going to come off as being elitist and HR snobbish. So they're not going to like you. You become less populist, right? Which she did. Yeah, I think she did. And if you don't come off as elitist and snobbish, then you sort of appear weak. So it's a lose-lose if you're a woman. In a sense,
I think
the only
that's
way
what
that
happened
you
kind of with Tim Walz, because Tim Walz was running on the elitist platform, but trying to be, just as you're saying, and he came off as weak, right?
Yeah, that's a bit of the issue here. It's sort of hard to nail that populism thing if you're running a female presidential candidate. So I'm assuming that this is, I've said it last time too, it's the last time we're ever going to see that tried. But yeah, I feel like at that, at least, it's a factor that sort of that I think makes it easier to judge who is going to win. I mean, in the case where you have two candidates that are both populist, you have to look at other things like the incumbent economy and stuff like this. But other than that, you should look for the one who has like the most appeal to the to the Kali Yuga demographic. So
Nordana says she said she believes that Trump wants to gather Western Christian civilization under himself, and Russia wants to consolidate Orthodox civilization and divide Europe amongst themselves along those lines. Well, that sounds, again, kind of far-fetched, but this is also the problem when she just on the offset says that it's about traditionalism and Evola. They're not using the same definition of tradition as Evola is. It's not his capital T tradition, right?
You should have just said based or something. Like, she has a much more based view of Trump and Putin than I think any of them have. And
that would be very cool.
Evola is like anti-Christian anyway. Evola is like pagans. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense from that side. I mean, if they were going to try something like that, it would have been possible. I mean, Russians are atheists mostly. I'm just getting through a lot of audiobooks on like modern Russian history, and I was reading all the Kremlin's men, basically, where they were talking about the kind of the merging of Orthodoxy and the Russian state. And this is something that sort of came about after Putin came in for his third term, and there was a lot of protests. Like, you had Alexander Navalny, Garry Kasparov, a lot of these characters that sort of appear because they didn't like Putin coming back. They sort of made an exception in the constitution so he could run for a third and fourth term, because he ran 2 terms. Then he was a prime minister under Dmitry Medvedev. And so there was a lot of protest and like this lot of anti-corruption sentiment. That's where like Pussy Riot and all this stuff comes in as well. And the anti-Putin protests and the sort of anti-Kremlin protests it was polled internally as being popular, but they started to attack the Orthodox Church as well. But that was sort of polled as being unpopular. Even though most Russians are not actively Christian, they have a positive view of the Russian Orthodox Church and the Patriarch Kirill, because he was sort of a TV celebrity. He had been built up as a kind of a TV celebrity in the 90s. So when Pussy Riot, when they were starting to go into these churches doing protests, it had a very negative kind of public perception. So the idea internally in the Kremlin was that they would just merge themselves to the Orthodox Church, in a sense, because that would just say it would shelter them from criticism externally, because they knew that, okay, well, we're not popular, but the church is popular. So now that's just an integral part of the Russian identity. And of course, there are some philosophical and historical precedents for doing that as well. But that is, in a sense, kind of what I think is a more sort of sensible explanation, is that, well, it was a sort of a populist move, in a sense, to get more people on board. But gathering them under the sort of Christian, it's really more of a spook. You have to just think of it as anti-liberalism, again, as a sort of like a counter to liberal institutions and to Western hegemony, rather than some kind of Christian civilizational stuff. I feel like this is, Vance has said certain things that could be interpreted that way, but maybe your teacher's right. It
feels like he's just sort of he's throwing morsels to the right constituents, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of people.
I would, Nordan, and if you get the chance, ask her what she thought about Revolt Against the Modern World. I mean, if she's going to make claims like this, she at least should have read the books, right?
Yeah, I think she's sort of implying that Trump is just a lot more ideological than he is. I don't think he has an ideological bone in his body. Maybe some of the Teal Network people have some ideas like that, but I think both Trump and Putin are similar in that way. That it's really kind of cynical pragmatism over ideology.
That's based and Tony Blair pilled. Ideology is a curse. You must purge it from your body. Okay. There's some more questions, but I'll hold off for a moment because now we'll follow up because we're already talking about sort of the election and stuff. This is from the Norwegian state media, basically BBC. It's a bit rough, the translation, so I'm going to keep the Norwegian one on hand and guide you guys through this. This says, many are frightened by the US election. Every fourth phone call to the church SOS helpline in the last couple of days have been about unrest around the election of Donald Trump as president of the United States. Mental Health, which is the name of an organization, has also noticed a greater influx. The election of Donald Trump as the next president of the United States has created uncertainty in many Norwegians. A lot of the help phone lines that offer someone to talk to when you're in a crisis situation are noticing an increase. During 24 hours, around 800 people call the church SOS helpline. Of all the conversations that the voluntary have the ability to answer, about 25% of them in the last couple of days are from people who are uneasy after the American election, according to the Secretary General Lasse Heimdal. This is a lot about anxiety and fear of the future, he says. We've had people asking if there are any bomb shelters, if there could be war in Norway, etc. Which is, to me, wild. But I'm gonna keep on reading. Fears of an unstable world. The Mental Health, which is an organization, has also noticed an increase in their helplines after the election results in the United States became clear, according to their Secretary General Linda Berg Hegland. We are noticing an increase both in the helplines and in our help chat. A lot of people are upset after the election and what this means for their safety and our nation's stability. A lot of people are concerned about what's going to happen in the Palestinian territories, what's going to happen to Ukraine, what Trump will do to try to end the war. And a lot of people also fear the United States will withdraw from NATO. Many of those who make contact are worried about what foreign policy Trump will impact Norway, he says. Women and children mostly make contact. Of those who have contacted with mental health, a large number is women, while people who contact them on their chat lines are usually kids or young adults. So it's not a lot of men, which makes sense, right? But well, I'm gonna save my opinions until the end. Let's see here. Many of the young are particularly concerned about the increased turmoil in the world. A lot of people say that their anxiety has increased after the election result was finalized. And then there's a large increase of grandparents who contact mental health. They contact mental health because they're upset and anxious about their grandchildren and their future in an uncertain world. This says unwanted. That's not the correct translation. This is unusual. It is very unusual for so many phones, for so many sort of phone calls to the helpline to be about one and the same topic. As a rule, usually it has to be about events that make a strong impression on many, according to the church SOS helplines. We actually have to go back to the tsunami in Thailand. Is that in like 2011 or something? 2009? I'm getting fuzzy on that.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah. we have to go back to something like the tsunami in Thailand, the terror attacks on Utaya, or the death of Ari Ben. Apparently, that shook the nation. I wasn't aware that the death of Ari Ben, who is the former husband of our the princess who is now with the shaman Durek. I wasn't aware that he was such a prominent figure in Norwegian life. But it's very evident that the American election has made an impression and is shaking, or it's, I guess, impacting a lot of people in Norway as well. Heimdall believes that these events can have a bit of a triggering effect for people who already are suffering with mental issues already. A lot of us are carrying a lot in our baggage, a lot of mental baggage, and there are many in Norway who live with fear of the future. And then, one event happens, and then one another, and then it sort of topples over, is what he says. This is something that the Mental Health Organization also notices. A lot of times, people who call us are people who are already unstable, or I guess not unstable, already anxious. A lot of people are lonely, and they might not have a lot of people. There's a lot of sort of support network to talk to, and they end up becoming afraid and calling us. And then there's a poll here about, are you worried about the presidential election in the United States? And you can choose yes, absolutely, no, it's going to go well, and I don't know, we'll have to wait and see is the one. And I can't show the results here because of the translation, but I opened it in another tab, and it's about 42% saying yes, 37% saying no, and 21% saying we'll wait and see. So it's about 50-50 yes to no, I'd say, which is a bigger number than I'd expect. Trying to encourage nuance. Church SOS Helpline encourages people to talk to each other about what's making you afraid and troubled, share what is difficult in everyday life. And it's very important to take care of the children. They also follow social media and they follow TV. And when they learn that world leaders who will be, that world leaders who are supposed to be role models uses language and expressions that they themselves would be grounded for using, it could be received as scary and upsetting. Berg Hegland in Mental Health believes that they say that they try to meet people in sort of their own fear and talk to them about what they are anxious about. Fear is always real, he says. But we try to nuance the image of the world and focus on things that actually work. We encourage people to log off and take a break from news and social media. And Norway has been unusually focused on the American election. So it's not weird that people are being impacted these days. So that's the article. What I find, and this is like the big, you talked about sort of elitism, right, Bloody Path, and I've gotten the question sort of like, if you're going to use one or two words to categorize your opinions or your political position, I picked one of mine as aristocratic. And I am in firm belief that the way liberal democracy works and the way that it works nowadays, especially compounded with social media, a lot of people who do not have the mental fortitude, the resilience, or any business knowing and thinking and pondering about world politics are being forced to do so. And if you're some sort of regular Joe, let's say you work at a grocery store, right? I mean, you're not supposed to be thinking about who the president of the United States is. Like, that's not supposed to impact your everyday life in any sort of way. You're not supposed to worry about that. I mean, if you work for the State Department, then yes. if you're an architect, I would say even then you might be educated, but you're not supposed to be like, it's not your place really. If we're just sort of thinking about this sort of perennially, it's not your place to worry about what the United States president is going to do, other than, oh well, maybe the interest rate's going to go up a bit. Am I totally off?
Well, it's there's different ways that you could look at this. I mean, I sort of agree that there are many people involved in politics that just have nothing to do there, nothing interesting to
But it's not
contribute whatsoever.
that.
But
I think it's not just politics. It's a lot of aspects of society where, you know, people who aren't equipped to deal with a lot of things are being forced to do so because we've decided that, you know, everyone is free and have to, right?
yeah, well, at the same time, it's. I mean, I've met a lot of people, like you said, who have these jobs who have surprisingly nuanced opinions on this, or like you talked about the Norland, the teacher, or I don't know how highly educated she is, but like you talk to these taxi drivers who have like an encyclopedic knowledge of
That's fair.
geopolitics.
I mean,
these,
it's wrong of me to
Yeah.
sort of judge based purely on sort of what work you do, right? But I was just trying to make an example of it. It's across education, right? It doesn't matter if you're an architect or you work at a grocery store. You're not supposed to be worried about this in a perfect world, right? That it's not your place in society to worry about what the president of the United States is going to do, because
well,
you're if you're not equipped to handle it, right?
I think a lot of people aren't equipped to handle it, but Trump is a historic figure. I feel like he's almost paradigm breaking in that sense. I think in the way that people in Europe would be worried about Napoleon or something. You know what he is doing around the world, and I think that it really is something big that is happening historically, and that people. In one sense, I think it's kind of encouraging, even though people are scared. It means that there are things happening, and people are acknowledging that there are things happening. Of course, I don't want them to be impacted, but at the same time, I'm not sure if the alternative of having like a mass of people who are completely disengaged from politics and world events are favorable either. You know, even though they might burn themselves on this or be concerned about it, I don't think they're. You know, you're not entirely wrong if we look at it as a globalized, connected system, and that certain things have big impacts on those systems. And if you do believe what's going on, then I think Trump will have large impact and will be kind of a historical figure, even though it might not be in the way I think a lot of people want it to. I don't think they're wrong for being concerned.
I don't think they're wrong for being concerned once the information reaches them in the way that it reaches them. But if the information reaches them, you know, in the way that it reaches them today, where it's just a constant blast of "you're gonna die," right? Because Trump got elected, then the system's not working for lack of a better word, the peasant, right?
Yeah, no, I think the too much information and the fair pornography and the incentives have kind of just engaged people in a very unconstructive way. With that stuff, they'd probably be better off with like radio or something, or just reading newspapers. Then there's something about like the video footage and the constant fair porn that's going on in social media that I think just just drives people absolutely nuts. Or it exhausts them adrenally.
Yeah.
To have to walk around thinking about this constantly.
And I'll be the first to admit, you know, I can be affected by this too, right? I noted, you know, I did have a lot of fun with Trump winning in a sense, right? And I did get sort of uncharacteristically a bit, you know, excited about it for like a day, and it's like, well, why do I really care? It's silly to be happy about this, really, because it's not really going to affect me a lot. And you know, I just logged off Twitter for a bit, and that calmed me down. It's not that hard.
Yeah, I think they should tune into the Longhouse to get balanced takes on these things. I think our last stream was sort of therapeutic in a weird way, where you just take a spreadsheet or something, and this is not necessarily spreadsheets, but a piece of paper, and this is a technique that they use in cognitive psychology as well, where you write down what do I expect to happen and how likely is that to happen from a scale of 1 to 5, for example, or how would I feel if this happened, or how can I handle if that happens? And you just kind of orient yourself towards certain points. And like we went through, what we believe Trump is going to do and how likely is it that Trump is going to do these things. And based on that, you can sort of get away from all these kind of nebulous worst case scenarios. So these ominous ideas that float around, that you sort of think that everybody's going to die and stuff. Okay, well, this is what he's promised to do. This is what is likely to happen. This is what's not likely to happen. And how does this affect me? And then you can have, like a more reality-oriented worldview where you don't have to burn yourself out.
Honestly, I think it's hard to place the blame on one sort of source or one node. But the Norwegian media is especially bad at this stuff because the Norwegian media has gone from a powerful political entity to basically just, clickbaity money-making machines.
I've not followed that much on the Trump coverage, actually, in this election. Sometimes I'll go in and read articles, but I get the impression that it was worse in 2016.
That might be, but I'm saying in general, sort of like the media houses of Norway has gone from powerful political entities who shaped this nation into something that only cares about getting as many clicks as possible, and whose primary worry is how much it's going to snow the next week, because that means we'll get more clicks, right? Instead of working alongside politicians, essentially, in shaping the nation.
Yeah, I do still think they have an effect. You never get away from that. But the clickbaity stuff and the social media centrism is it's inevitable. My own reaction to the election was a bit kind of ambivalent. After what I've been sort of more concerned about is the cabinet picks, right? That's what I was thinking about, not really Trump himself, but who he's going to appoint. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster to watch social media like the last weeks, to see some cabinet picks are coming in and people are being upset, and then some others are coming in. Like my question is, how many Jews is he going to put in the cabinet, and how many Eurasianists is he going to put in? And so far, he was pretty good on Jews. But then you got some suspect. I knew he was going to put Tulsi in there, but like as like chief of all the intelligence agencies. I don't know. It's pretty sus, to be honest. Well, I'll see how that pans out. It's probably that's like my biggest concern right now. It's like Tulsi in that position. It's not Trump. It's her. Because you have all these Dave Smith, Joe Rogan, Mises Caucus clowns who just want to appoint the entire Judge Knapp.
But what's Mommy Tulsi going to do?
Well, they want like the Judge Knapp podcast circuit in Trump's cabinet, like every single character they have. McGregor as Minister of Defense, or like Scott Ritter as the
Theo Vaughn as Minister of Communications.
Yeah, that's what they're imagining, and that's part of the kind of the post-truth complex that they've been sold that, and they're really disappointed.
Like meme template that's like, I would go to school if Andrew Tate was the teacher, and
yeah, he'll give Andrew Tate a position as well. He'll be the assistant health minister of health or something. But Vivek and Elon is relegated to some retarded department.
They literally did the Office meme of like co-managers.
Yeah, so that's not.
It's hilarious, and it's the Department of Efficiency. Oh, that's
so this
great.
this is just comedy stuff, but Tulsi is the only one that I'm really that concerned with. Otherwise, it seems kind of normal, surprisingly normal in terms of the total composition of that cabinet.
All right, so here we have another question from the YouTube Q&A session. Krang Sang asks, are modern video games getting worse, or are millennials just being nostalgic? As an aside, have you heard about the new game called Norse? No, but I did look it up, and it looks interesting, so I'll check that out. Okay, let's side rail and talk about video games for a bit, because it's been a while since Gamergate, and I don't get to talk a lot about video games and politics anymore. modern video games on one side are getting worse in the sense that, you know, DEI, as it were, won Gamergate, like the feminists won video game, no, Gamergate, um, which has led to a lot less, I think, meritocracy in video games. That's one thing. It's a bit of a competency crisis, but I don't think that is as, like, people like to sort of drag, you know, oh, some kind of feminist worked on this video game, that's why it sucks. There's another another part of why modern video games suck is because the industry itself has sort of painted itself into a corner and it's struggling to get out, because they built up their development houses on these huge, big, massive blockbuster projects. Because if you go back 10 years, in 2012, building a video game was a lot more difficult than it is today. But the past 10 years has seen a lot of sort of democratization, as it's called, of video game development tools. Things like Unity, etc. A lot of the pipeline for building, crafting a video game has become a lot easier. The technology has become a lot better. And in the best case, without commenting on the quality of the video game itself, or whatever the video game is about, in the best case, you'll get something like Baldur's Gate 3, which I forget the name of the studio. They're from some Eastern European country, which is, for all intents and purposes, a AA studio. By just working smart, are able to punch way above their weight in terms of content creation. But on the other hand, you have these massive studios like EA or their sub studios who are struggling to find that sort of like medium point where they can put together a team who can make a video game in a shorter time with a smaller budget and still have it come out okay. And something, I haven't played the new Dragon Age game. I haven't played any Dragon Age games since, I think, 2. But the third one was massive. It's one of those like old big blockbuster video games, and apparently they probably spent, I mean, in the long term, it's not a sustainable business model, so they scale back, but they're not used to working in that way. And so what comes out is this like shitty product that some indie team can beat them in. So they're Belgian. Sorry, the people who made Baldur's Gate, and you saw that a lot with like the Kickstarter things. Like some games made it through. I mean, the whole reason a studio like Obsidian is still around is because they were able to leverage these tools way more effectively than their contemporaries to basically revive the genre of CRPGs in the modern day. And you'll see that a lot more going forward. You have to be really good. If you're going to do like AAA video games today, you have to either have a very specific scope, or you have to have like, you have to do it old school, like go really hard on meritocracy and be good at graphics, be good at technology, basically be like id Software, right? Where you get like the best guys who create the best graphics and go really hard. Okay, so Bill Wilson says Obsidian has been shit for 10 years. Well, I'm talking about sort of I'm not talking about the merits of the video games themselves, right? I'm not talking about, is this game good? Is this game based or not? I'm talking about whether or not are you able to create products that people want to buy, right? And modern AAA studios are having a really hard time creating games that people want to buy on the same level as medium-sized development teams are. And with things like Steam, etc., gaining popularity, selling those games has become easier as well. So, to answer your question, are modern video games getting worse? Yes, but I think this is just like growing pains. Like you have to have a bit of a bust period before you can boom again. And because we're now putting the woke back, as it were, it's all gonna be Gucci in like 5 years.
Well, to be honest, I'm really not sure if the answer is yes on that one. I mean, like you said, because of budgetary constraints, there has been a split, but also because of the availability of pre-configured software, it's so easy to make, say, indie video games, for example. I think it's been I play a lot of indie stuff, and I find new cool stuff all the time. Like say like the RimWorlds, or your Cupheads, or the Hades, or the Hotline Miami's, or the like the Binding of Isaacs, or there's like stuff like this that is coming out that's sort of relatively easy to make, and it's so cool. And I just I keep discovering new titles all the time. But
those are the winners. The losers are going to be, for a while, are going to be the medium-sized projects who are all, because they're all going to look like Fortnite. I mean, the new Dragon Age game looks like Fortnite because they're using the same pipelines, they're using the same techniques, and the medium-sized games that are coming from within the big development houses are going to suffer for a while. The small indie teams are going to do great. The medium teams who are able to do what was the name of the studio? Larian, who are able to do what Larian did, is basically punch above your weight. The guys who did Kingdom Come Deliverance, I count among this as well. A relatively, considering what they're going up against, small team who are able to publish something that could be considered above their weight, and especially looking at what the next game is going to be. The other thing is essentially free to play and the live service model. As much as people hate the live service model in modern video games, for indie teams and for teams who are or studios who are willing to foster a community, it's been a huge success. I mean, Warframe, Path of Exile, games like that are doing better than ever, and they've made money hand over fist compared to contemporaries. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just in terms of like the general impact of woke and the direction of games, you still have your like the Rockstar games, for example, like the Red Dead Redemptions, the GTA 5s. These games weren't woke in any way that I understand that. You have the FromSoft, dungeon crawlers, the Nintendo Zelda stuff, the Smash Brothers stuff. Like, as far as I'm not huge on AAA stuff, but as far as I know, like Elden Ring is super popular and it's really super good. There's a lot of really good titles out there that do.
But
a lot
Elden
of
Ring is also
an
accumulation of like 10 years of From Software development, right? There's
but
still
all of
animation
those
from Dark Souls 1 in Elden Ring, right?
Yeah, I know, but it's but all of those games were good, and they were in like post Gamergate
exactly.
territory, right? So
they're during and then post,
yeah. So, but I just don't see the sort of cumulative effect. You get it in some titles, this kind of wokey stuff, but generally, I don't feel like it's had that negative of an impact. If you talk about, there was a political stuff that was happening from Gamergate, but in terms of like, you look at the biggest titles, right? The things that is the most popular, like say GTA 5 or something. Okay, maybe Dragon Age, I could grant you, has wokeness. The Batman games were very popular. I don't think they were woke. Mass Effect,
never played those, I think.
Maybe a little bit. Bioshocks, Metal Gear Solid, the Hideo Kojima games, Borderlands, Resident Evil. You have a lot of horror stuff as well that's been quite good. I think this sort of AAA horror, like the Outlasts and a lot of these white knuckle games. So I'm not really feeling like video games are in this huge decline.
No, I'm not saying that they're
people
in a huge decline, but I'm saying that
about.
you're gonna see games getting worse in the creative sense. And I should have been more specific because, as I said, I'm talking specifically about things that are coming out of AAA development houses, right? They're going to have to get worse before they're going to have to get better. And we're seeing it already. Like, it was this huge PlayStation game that absolutely bombed, and they ended up pulling it just recently. They've been working on it. They put huge amount of money into it. PS5 shooter game shuts down. Let's see here. What's the name of the game? Concord. Sony shutters shooter game Concord 2 weeks after launch. Concord game budget. They tanked $400 million on that game. and probably years of development when they could just split that dev team off into 4 parts, make 4 games for 4 different audiences, and they'd be good, right? And that's the shift that's happening. That's what I mean when games are going to get worse. Is essentially they're going to get more samey, and they have been already. we're just sort of seeing the slump part of it now, or the bust part of it now. So as I said, give it 5 years and we'll be back in like a golden age or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we've exhausted that topic.
Yeah. A bit late to the topic, but isn't Romney a massive Zionist? Yeah, sure, probably. A lot. I think any Republican.
We're talking about
hearing
American
is-
politicians here, so
Yeah.
we have to qualify that. I mean, what do you want? Yeah, unless you're getting David Duke or something to run, then yeah, that's what you're getting.
Okay, this is a huge one. I'm gonna have to save it. Let's save that for later, and talk a little bit about large increase in robbery and violence among adolescents. We've covered youth crime before multiple times, and it's an ongoing discussion in Norway. So this is something that was published yesterday in the Norwegian state media, and it's about a new report, essentially. The number of reports for young people has decreased. The more serious offenses across the country are increasing. So there are a little bit less crime, but the seriousness of the crime is increasing. In Oslo, the number of robberies has almost doubled in 1 year, which is alarming. I mean, sure, if we're going from 0.1 to 0.2, but I think we'll get into the numbers here. From January to August, the proportion of juvenile delinquency has been lower in 2024 compared to the same period last year. This is according to new figures from the Criminal Case Register, which state media has received access to. However, the figures show that a large increase for serious offenses are happening in the age group 10 to 17. While there were 4,011 reports for robbery, violence, and threats in the first and second tertiary in 2023, there were 4,429 in 2024. This is an increase of over 10%. In Troms, the increase is 55%. It's especially youth robbery that is increasing in a lot of places. Nationwide, robbery reports have increased by nearly 70%. So here you can see total from 2023 to 2024, it's about a doubling of robbery reports. More youth robberies in Oslo. In the Oslo Police District, the number has almost doubled. While 125 robbery reports were registered in the period in 2023, 247 were registered in 2024. For the city of Oslo, this is the highest number of youth robberies in 7 years, says Janne Beckman Dahl. She is the head of the unit for preventative work in the Oslo Police District. This worries us, and we're working purposefully to stop this development. She's on the case, guys. According to Dahl, much of the increase is due to robbery and violence reports. Much of the increase is due to reports on gang members that have several reports against them already. There are a few children and young people who commit repeated crimes, and it characterizes the statistic. But it is serious because you see that this crime is committed by young people, and it also has young victims. So what she's saying is this is happening in smaller circles. But I would assume that because there are more robberies happening, the impact that small circle has is widening quite rapidly, right? At the same time, a large proportion of the reports are for threats. Most of the increase in violence we see compared to the same period last year is linked to an increase in the number of reports for threats. But there's also been an increase in the reports of physical violence. More chaotic culture of violence. Salto. Oh yeah, this is one of them programs. A coordinator in the Alna district, Naum Haile Jonas, describes that the culture of violence among young people in Oslo as chaotic. They are getting younger and younger, and there's a lot of mental illness among a part of the youth. He emphasizes that substance abuse is often part of the image of violence that is being painted. Many of the young people I have worked with are raised with trauma that they have not processed. And it's evident when they use intoxicating substances and end up in these conflicts. Jonas also sees a development in violent incidents that are not related to organized criminals. The ones we see now that are behind the violence in the streets of Oslo is a youth environment that isn't as organized as before. So he's sort of we're moving away from like small gangs of youngsters to basically just, I guess, random violence.
It's just
Just
Kali Yuga shit,
outbursts
really.
first. Yeah, it's just street fights.
I
There's a much more
thought this was connected to drug gangs or something that they would be recruited into at an earlier age to try to circumvent prison sentences or something. But they're saying that it's just worse now, or
Yeah, I guess. There's a more chaotic culture of violence that occurs among young people without being directly associated with any organized gangs. Stian Lied, who is researching criminology at Oslo Met, says the reason for the increase is complex. Parts of this seem to be related to the fact that children and adolescents commit more violence in recent years, but we have also been given increased propensity to report violence that children and young people commit. So he's saying that it's over-reporting.
it's like
Is
the
that
rape
it?
stats. Then I guess.
I guess. However,
there's
he's
there's
not.
something to that, right? I saw this stat thing on Twitter not too long ago where they talked about like rapes per capita or something, and then it's like Sweden is like the top in the world. It's like higher than Mexico and India or whatever. And this is a reporting thing, right? It's not. It doesn't actually reflect what's going on the ground.
Yeah. He's not surprised that violence is increasing among young people. He believes that the pandemic contributed to this. This was a period when particularly vulnerable children had less adult contact, less social training, and less training in conflict resolution. Relations between the youth and the municipalities, schools, and police preventative work was weakened. What we see now is an increasing degree of problem behavior. It is not surprising. He also believes that social media can help escalate conflicts. We must understand the youth culture of today and help them to resolve the conflicts they have across their groupings. I think we have a great potential to curb violence. Janne Beckman Dahl says that the juvenile delinquency is a high priority for the police, but they have a few instruments for those who are under the criminal age. Oslo police have requested that child welfare must be given the opportunity, child welfare as in the sort of organization or the bureaucracy, must be given the opportunity to use coercive measures against some of those under criminal age. We also want more places to be established in juvenile detention that can accommodate those under the age of 18. So it's not prisons per se, but it's juvenile detention. It's a softer form of prison, right?
Yeah, the youth clubs will not help. We need
the youth clubs are not helping. We need to lock them up, essentially. What measures do the police themselves work with? We investigate all of these cases, even where the perpetrator is under the criminal age. But we also work closely with the municipalities and others to prevent further crime and to follow up on anyone who commits offenses until they are 18 years old. Because when you're 18 years old, you stop doing crime. In the political quarter, the Progress Party's let's see, what's his name? So this is a daily sort of radio show called The Political. It's like 15 minutes or something of politics. So there's one from the Progress Party and the current Justice Minister, Amelia Enger-Mail. They talked about juvenile delinquency, and both parties agreed that more spaces are needed in juvenile detention facilities. Today, there are only 10 spots. Is this in the entire nation? Let's see here. Mel says we need a prison sentence to a greater extent now than before. The capacity has to almost triple in 2026, and she promises that next year there will be 21 positions at their disposals. So I guess these are like temporary prison sentences, like it's like a week or something, I guess. Considering how few spaces there is.
Yeah, it sounds experimental then. If it's only 10
Yeah.
spots.
Njosta, who is the opposing guy from the Progress Party, which is the right-leaning party, is somewhat sharper in his formulation. 2230 is not enough. Today, the capacity is completely blown up. We need to have more. Criminal care must have enough resources. It's an agency that is starving. Nahum Jonas believes that the solution must be found jointly. It is not enough to assume that these young people have a criminally organized gang in their at their backs. If we are to help them, we must understand their chaotic and challenging everyday life. Only then can we put in the right action that actually makes them choose different directions. Only then can we counteract the development we've seen in Sweden. Former B gang, which is like an old school criminal gang in Norway member, and now youth worker Gulam Abbas, believes that this approach is preferable to harsher penalties. We're talking about children here. They have different degrees of maturation based on their needs that were met in childhood. I became more criminal by being in prison. I got a bigger network, he says, during the political 15 minutes. Abbas points to life at home and follow-up from parents as the root of many young people ending up as criminals. Many of the parents come from war-torn countries and they bring a lot of luggage. Overall, the proportion of reports in Norway is declining among youth people. In Agder, in the south, the robbery and violence reports fell by around 20%. At the same time, 3 times as little violent offenses have been registered in Finnmark, which is all the way up in the north this year as last year. So it seems to be that Oslo is the place, Oslo and in the east, that's where it's like going up. Janne Beckman Dahl says that much of the decline, especially for Oslo, is due to fewer shoplifting. Stianlid says it's basically positive. At the same time, we know that child and juvenile delinquency goes up and down a little year by year, and such fluctuations is really to be expected. So, I mean, nothing new, essentially, but we're monitoring the situation closely, and we're increasing the number of delinquent prison spaces, I suppose. We almost have to get going. I don't think we have. Nordan asked if we're really putting the woke away, and I think that's too big of a topic to tackle now. Nomusan says, "Do you think there will be American Civil War by April? Like what if Altis or whatever his name is suggests? I think that's a bit too
Who was suggesting this?
extreme. What's his name? What if Alt Hist?
Oh, yeah.
I think is
he's just retarded. I mean, every video he does is just some kind of sensational stuff. He was talking about the incel revolution, and then he was talking. it's either like the incels are going to kill everybody, or the civil war is going to happen. Or it's just. I mean, most of it's just engagement bait. Civil war actually has to have clearly defined factions and leaders that want this stuff to happen. So I don't know, like his total rationale. I guess we could react to the video at some point, or maybe I'll do it on my channel. I can just do sit and watch what if Alt Hist videos and react. But it's become this kind of like the right-wing ecosystem to just mass produce these kind of like super doomer predictions based on people who are high on crack and who's read a lot of history. But it's it's just not very good journalism. It's not very good predictive. Let's just say predictive material. It's just entertainment, and you have to look at it as such.
Yeah. Pasha says, referencing the article, Gulam Abbas demands geld from the Danes to pacify the young braves. That's funny. Do we want to do the X thing about the bureaus?
I don't think we have time. We'll just have to.
We have to save this because it's an interesting topic, but I think we're going to have to save it.
I think by next week there'll be even more accounts will have removed themselves from the platform.
Probably, yeah. I think it's time to end the stream. We're both a bit tired today, sorry about that. But we'll, of course, as always, be back next week with more slop for you guys to consume. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for chatting and asking the questions. It's a new feature on YouTube. I'm trying it out, seeing if it's interesting and creating some sort of back and forth with you guys. You can, of course, follow Ludwig Path on Twitter. And he also has his YouTube channel linked down below, LPTV. The latest video he did was about an hour deep diving into a Danish politician that's been sort of doing the rounds. He appeared on American television as well, it seems. He's a very strange character. It gets really wild around like 50 minutes or something when he starts talking. It becomes really weird. His worldview is very strange, but I think it is a very nice deep dive into a lot of these like one-man bands, like the Geert Wilders, right, types.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. Geert Wilders is actually a serious political player, right? But there is this network of these smaller one-man parties. Like
Yeah.
say like Dave Curtin, for example, in the UK would be an example of that.
I guess Geert Wilders is sort of putting him in the same box is a bit of a disservice to Geert Wilders himself, right?
Yeah, I mean, just in the degree of seriousness, but like these sort of one-man bands that are just more set up to do online grifting. Like they have a political party, but they don't really spend much time campaigning or anything. It's just social media stuff that they're doing and cultivating a following, getting some money, and just pushing some of the most wacky worldview stuff that you've been around. I mean, there's just so much of it on Twitter. I just don't like. Not a lot of people covering it either, so it's kind of hard for me to tell what people consider normal at this point. I feel like people's reality perception has just gone so off the rails because of social media that it's hard for me even to like. I point at something and I think it's weird, but for other people it's just normal.
Yeah. Nordhuger asked us real quick here. Have you heard all the discussion lately on Denmark selling Greenland to the US? Yeah, I've heard about it. I don't think the Danes are going to go willingly. That's all I have to say about it, really. I think it's like really just in a practical political sense, it's going to be difficult because it's lodged in there in terms of like the constitution or something. Not that it wouldn't be possible if they really wanted, but I doubt they will. Yeah, you can follow Ludwig Path down below if you want to on YouTube here as well. As I said, you can follow me on Twitter as well. A walrus, bit more fun posting these days. And lastly, let's see here. I will be attending and speaking at the Karl Stage 2025 in Germany, which is in April, at the end of April next year. Check out this at shieldings.com. There you can find speakers such as I'll do my best German Schattenmacher, Boris von Morgenstern, Lavader Tirmer, Sargon of Akkad, a walrus, and a mystery guest speaker. So check that out if you are Germany or Germany adjacent. It's going to be an English event, so even if you're flying in, you'll be able to attend just fine. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching once again. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week, and have a good rest of your evening and a great weekend. Bye-bye.